Can I get a mic or a mic and a half? That the source owe me. Shout out to the editor staff. Yeah, I'm all grown, so much better with math. I need a spread in the Forbes, taking the Benjamin bath. Yeah, I'm serving this track like Steffi Graf. Yeah, Roger Federer, there's no competitor.
Urban Tennis, Episode 10, Temple of Doom. Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, joined by my co-host.
How do you do?
Fantastic. We're back with our regular discussion of tennis. This week, we're going to be covering the preview and the run-up to Shanghai, recapping the events of Beijing, looking at Asian tennis in general, and then a little special notification and a little nod to recently retired David Nalbandian, plus the games, the social media highlights that you all look forward to. So if you're ready, this edition of Urban Tennis begins right now. This past week, Novak Djokovic was able to enact a little revenge on Rafael Nadal by beating him rather convincingly in the China Open. But where he was winning that tournament, he was losing his number one ranking, which Nadal finally took over after a seemingly inevitable romp to that since the middle of the year. Now we know that Djokovic is left in a spot that he hasn't been in for a while, number 2. But I want to bring in my co-host now. Does anything drastically change for Djokovic now, being number 2, or do you think he's going to do much of the same and that this is just a temporary setback?
Oh, without a doubt. How can you say Djokovic is going to play differently now he's number 2? I think at least Djokovic should feel like he's always been number 2, for this season at least.
No, I don't think it's being number 2 necessarily. It's just that the stigma that it's changed. He's not number 1, so you're almost human nature to change something, right? He's fallen off the cliff. And I think you're right, and you're going on to something. I'm going to let you keep saying that, but is there something instinctively he thinks mentally that he has to change something because he has lost the number 1 ranking?
Okay, yeah, I see where you're getting there, but I think Djokovic was already starting to realize that as the U.S. Open final was probably playing, right? Like, he's thinking, all right, lose this. This is starting to look like Rafa's year. It looks like nobody will be able to stop him this year. So I think this is where the moment actually happened where, he has lost the number 1 ranking, but I think he's realizing that this was a while in the coming.
But what I've liked in his demeanor is that he's fairly encouraged, and he's talked about, still trying to be the year-end number 1, which is, fairly unrealistic at this point. He still hasn't lost either whenever we can consider the talk. He's talking a big game. He's talking like the number 1 player, and definitely on court. You could see it this week in Beijing. Rafa looked slightly off, but Djokovic was very sharp. Not a lot of errors. Convincing victory. And, if you ask me right now whose next 5 years I'd rather have, I'm still going to go with Novak Djokovic over Rafael Nadal and over any of his rivals. So I really think I'm with my co-host here. You can't be thinking drastic changes. And it's just that, it's just a number right now, and he's going to have to work through it anyway.
Yeah, I think other than Wimbledon this year, I think Nadal, this would have been Nadal's best year ever. If he just didn't have that early exit at Wimbledon, there'd be no doubt that performance by performance, it'd be tough to beat Nadal this year.
Yeah, and it's still going to be one of the better years we've ever had. While in Beijing, we had the last WTA Premier Mandatory event. And whereas Serena Williams won her 10th tournament of the year, the first time she's done that. But the funny thing is, when you read WTAtennis.com, and they basically profiled her with others, Martina Navratilova won 10 tournaments in a year for 9 straight years. So just grasp your head around that. So just see how things have changed. But we know Serena can win, and we know she did a great job. Radwansko's fairly easy, but her finals opponent against Jelena Jankovic, another easier victory. But let's just talk about Jelena Jankovic. She was one of those players who was really pushed into the forefront after Justine Henin retired in 2007, becoming number 1 in 2008, basically because there was nobody else, really. She was a consistent finals contender, hadn't won the Slam, still hasn't won the Slam, was just one of those great workhorses. And now 5 years onwards, over 30, she's done it again. She's basically come back from the fringes of the top 30 to be a top 10 player and clinched her berth for Istanbul this year. Just speak to what Jelena Jankovic and that basically work ethic means to either current stars and current players, but also to the casual fan who really appreciate what hard work and consistency can do to a player, even when you think you can write them off.
Well, yeah, I think it just shows how much the tennis landscape has changed from even like 10 years ago, that you can't just assume, like the whole old joke was a women's tennis player by the time she's 22, she'd be an old maid. I don't think you can say that anymore. I think the game has changed, that these players are having longer careers so that they can go through these certain lulls even in their younger years to come back and be competitive later on. And I think we're seeing that with Jankovic. And a lot of players, and of course the most notable example being Kim Clijsters, coming back after becoming a mother and winning a Grand Slam. So I think at a point like that, players like Jelena Jankovic are starting to take note that your career is not over when you're 30. It's just the second stage of your career now. All right. So then moving on to the other Asian tour, Asian city, we're going to talk about Shanghai, also in China. So just in case you didn't know that. So do you think Rafa has any extra motivation left for his 6th Master Series title? Sorry about that. And his first in Shanghai.
Well, Rafa's week was uneven in Beijing, but the fact is that he's now number 1. He's got a fairly good draw in Shanghai. He's on the opposite side of Djokovic and Federer, but he has Del Potro on his side. I think realistically he wants one of these last two, either Paris or Shanghai. Ones he hasn't won. Rafa's a great, I think, after many years on tour, you appreciate that he appreciates history of tennis. He's one of the more vocal opinions after the ATP 40 event with all the number ones. He kind of felt that people should be appreciating the history of tennis as it goes. So I'm pretty sure he knows that he doesn't have either of the two, and the fact that if he wins 6, no one's ever done that. If he can do it, he's never played great here. The last time he played a 3rd round exit. But I think it's something definitely in his mind that he wants to do well in Shanghai. I don't think he's going to be the favorite. You tend to agree with that?
Yeah, I do. But I'll just say, if there's a year that you're going to pick Nadal, like you said, Nadal's going to have that. Still probably going to be a player who's going to have that motivation to take a 6th Masters event. I'm going to say this is a year he's most likely to do it. More so than previous years, more so than years in the future. Because right now, I think we're seeing the best Nadal can play on hard court this season. And I think it's going to be tough for him to repeat this in a future year for this amount of consistency for this amount of time. I mean, especially early in his career, he was not that successful on hard court. So I think this year he's really found his stride. And I think this year he can still take it. But I still think you got to give the favorite to a more established player not saying Nadal's a non-established player, but a player like Djokovic would probably be the favorite still.
Right. Another storyline that always kind of takes over these latter Master Series events is those players that are in contention for the race to London. So we're not going to talk about Wawrinka, Gasquet, Raonic, Tsonga, those right there, but how about a little lower down? Tommy Haas, John Isner, they're in the teens. If one of them can potentially challenge a semifinal berth, it's going to help their causes greatly. Who do you think is better positioned, either with the quality of their play right now or the fact of their opponents? And we saw them win their first round matches yesterday. Who do you like better in Shanghai, Isner or Tommy Haas?
I'm going to have to say Isner, because I think he's a lot more motivated at this point. He had a big disappointment at the U.S. Open. So I think he's coming off that, going to his Asian swing. I think he really wants to pick up a lot of points at a Masters event, because that'll be his last shot before he gets to Paris. And then after that, it's London, right? Am I missing one?
Yeah, basically. Yeah. But I agree. I think Isner is definitely showing a recommitment. to these hard court events. And why shouldn't he? His game is tailor-made for indoor hard courts, whether it be in Asia and Europe. I think he's got the greatest to gain by having a fantastic performance because, once again, he was out for Australia. So anything he does now, he's going to be set up really well post-Australia. And Tommy Haas, I think maybe has not been on a great track record in this hard court season. You know, he was fantastic in Miami with that win over Djokovic, but he's been kind of shaky. So I lean toward Isner. The last couple of podcasts we've had have really centered around the Asian swing and these tournaments that have really popped up in the last decade in Asia. Some of it revolving around the 2008 Olympics coming to China, but mostly, you know, that's where the tours seem to be going. So with all these prestigious events now here, what do you think is the foreseeable future for the two tours in Asia?
Well, I think as long as sales remain strong and ticket sales, as long as viewership remains strong, I think the idea is to keep it here for the foreseeable future because there's such an untapped potential here. I mean, you already have markets spread out all across the world before this, and now you have tournaments in Asia, so you pretty much cover the entire world. The only challenge will be trying to get tennis at the grassroots level really working. I mean, obviously you do have you have Lina in China, you have a lot of players who have already become successful, but to make it as part of the cultural awareness in China, in Japan, like make sure that it sticks there. Make sure that it's always part of the sports discussion will be the next part of the challenge.
That's an interesting thought, right? I don't think I've ever thought of it that, you know, we always kind of tend to gravitate towards, okay, there's big money sponsors here, so it makes sense that the tours are expanding to the Middle East. They're expanding to Asia. But I think long term, it's going to be the grassroots levels. You know, if players are not coming out of these countries, if tennis is not part of the sports conversation, you know, those money sponsors are going to move on, right? Because that's a new generation of fans, of consumers, that tennis, if they cannot hook on to their sport, is basically they're going to have to retreat back to their, you know, European stronghold, and that'd be pretty tragic. You know, it's a time where sport is expanding, and tennis has been one of the stronger expansions. It's been measured, and they've had success in it. The WTA Championships will be coming to Singapore next year, and that's going to be a great success for the WTA. So I think definitely grassroots is going to help it, but obviously if there is a drawback, it's going to be is tennis talked about, and will the sponsors, because it's being talked about, stay with tennis?
Well, yeah, and then what do you think about the other point? I mean, it used to be there were tournaments in American cities like Dallas. There used to be a lot more prestige played on tournaments such as in Rome earlier in the season. So do you think these traditional tennis markets, you could say, are starting to feel more alienated, and the game they start made to lose their market share in established markets?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting balance because I know the States have lost a lot of tournaments, and they're now being replaced by Asian tournaments. They may be more replaced by South American events, but it's going to be difficult not to alienate your strongholds, right? Tennis right now, in the last 20 years, has become players coming from Europe. That's where the champions are. You know, you don't want to lose those bases, but you still need to expand, because if you just become a European sport, you're losing so much of your market. So it's going to be a tricky balance. So far, I think they've done well. You know, I don't think anybody's truly complaining about the Asian swing. It's almost kind of, since they're group it together, players take it seriously. They know that, hey, I'm going for a month. I'm going to play in all these Asian countries. So they kind of commit to it. I think it works right now.
Well, yeah, I guess the only thing they could improve is getting more television coverage. So I think because getting like 3 a.m., 4 a.m. coverage on ESPN2, I don't think it should be that big of a challenge because there's really nothing else on at that time. All right, and now we're going to talk about it. And we're going to talk about the other big news. We're not going to talk about Asia anymore. We're going to talk about David Nalbandian, a very much talked about player because of his on-court performances. And when I mean performances, I'm not talking about just his on-court successes, or maybe lack thereof if you're not a fan. We're going to talk about his over-the-top, viral video-worthy actions. And, we're going to expand the topic a little bit. We're going to talk about how vital is viral video for a sport like tennis in the current sports landscape.
I think it's really vital. Just basing on our talk about the Asian swing, not a lot of countries have tennis at the forefront, right? It's not the most popular sport in tons of countries. So you need these little 2-minute clips that you can put on YouTube, that you can put on the daily sports highlight shows that capture either a funny side, one of the more darker sides of tennis, something that people can talk about, right? Because, you could always talk about your built-in the greatest of all time conversations, those top players, but those moments where, tennis is shown in a different light, reach more people or reach different people. And I think that's always good. Fresh blood in any sport, or enticing any fresh blood in any sport, is really important in such a competitive sports landscape.
And in North America, there's only so many baseball highlights you can watch in July. So it's a good time to get some viral videos out of that time.
Yeah, and we were talking about David Nalbandian, who reached number 3, but some people may only remember him for smashing that box where the line judgment hurt his leg, right? So these videos become different things for different people, right? You're always going to have people who appreciate the fact that Nalbandian in 2007 beat Nadal and Federer at 2 Master Series events. No one's ever done that in the same year. So, and others are going to say, hey, he was kind of angry and kind of weird. And, that's how I know David Nalbandian. Okay, we're almost nearing the end of this edition of the Urban Tennis Podcast. But like always, we like to end with games. So this week, because it's Shanghai, because it's the penultimate Master Series event, we're going to have some challenges for players, schedulers, tour makers, fans, everybody who's around. So I'm going to start. My first challenge is to David Ferrer, who reached number 3 in the world, mostly because Andy Murray's out with his back injury. But David Ferrer, start playing like a number 3, okay? I know the last time you did was in Paris. You've had a terrible summer. You're going to have a lot of points to defend in Paris where you're the defending champion. So come out here in Shanghai, show us that you are the number 3 in the player in the world, that you beat anybody except those top few players, and that you are one of the best grinders out there. Okay? Have a fantastic tournament and really prove that you're number 3.
All right, and my challenge goes out to the ATP website. For the first time, I found out there's a bracket challenge on the website called ATP Fantasy Challenge. So around like 10 o'clock Saturday night, I get on my computer, I try getting my picks in, try registering, but nothing is working. Like, come on, guys, get your IT together and let me make my picks.
Wow, yeah, I actually did get in, so and I'm having a terrible week right now. Thank you, Janko Tipsarevic. My third and final challenge is to Shanghai. You are such great hosts in the sense that you treat your players well, but I, as a casual fan, as someone who believes that true fans are born in the back row, you need to come out, support these players, show that Chinese fans are rambunctious, are very passionate about the sport, and that when you have the privilege to watch these great players, you're in the seats, you're cheering wildly if you can. So my challenge is to Shanghai fans: have a great week of tennis. These don't come around that often. Okay? The social media highlight of the week comes from Facebook this week. Samantha Stosur is one of the few, I think, top 20 players not to have Twitter. I actually thought this was on Twitter at first. That's what I think sometimes. But on Facebook, she posted a photo where she received a candy sushi making present from one of her fans while she's in Osaka. Then she showed a picture of her successfully making some really appetizing candy sushi. So that kind of epitomizes what we think the cross of tennis and Asian culture should be. It's sushi candy. That's tennis. At its greatest. We have a little outro song. My co-host is going to give a little introduction to that, and then we're almost done.
All right. I'm just going to put it quickly. K Captcha, Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom, intro, Shanghai. That's going to be music to play us out here.
Okay, so everyone, enjoy Shanghai. Master Series events are always interesting, always a worthy champion. That's been episode 10, Temple of Doom.
Anything goes. 一望一路就查口罩美好情愫是刷了红颜一道一道 Anything goes 黄黄是热血一点到头变把味把变味道梦我总知道都是会努克下 Good to 我随飞我龙井劳动我走红色的风一定会爆 Anything goes